Welcome back to our live stream classes. Here we are doing some modeling in Fusion 360 aimed specifically at woodworkers, because that is something that is unfortunately sadly lacking on YouTube. If you're new to Fusion 360, there are some absolutely phenomenal videos out there by a YouTube streamer whose name is Lars Christensen, and I would highly recommend you go and take a look at those. But if you are a woodworker, those videos are great, but they don't show you everything that you need to know about putting wood together in Fusion. And that's where I come in here. So this is part of our online training program. We have one-on-one and group personalized classes where you actually get to participate, but I've been streaming some of these classes lately where I'm just giving information and basic skills and a few advanced ones on how to use Fusion 360, not just as a woodworker, but how to use it efficiently and get the things that you need out of it to improve your woodworking, rather than just say, I want to model something, but I want to model something because I'm going to build it. Or I want to model something because I want to show a potential client what it is. So that's what we're going to do. Now, we are going to go right to the basics here and model a small mitered box. I mean, the first thing that you make as a woodworker is probably going to be one of two things. It's going to be a stool, or it's going to be a small mitered box. We've already modeled some stools in these live stream classes, but we haven't modeled a mitered box yet. So let's give that a start. Now, this is Fusion 360, clean, standard installation. This is the educational version, but it looks very much like the version that you get if you are a hobbyist, which you can get for free. If you're a student, this is what you get, the educational version, also for free. They have almost exactly the same feature set, and you don't have to worry about it because we're not going to use anything that is not in the free hobbyist version. So the only thing that I'm going to change from the default settings is I'm going to click on this square up here with the right mouse button and turn this to perspective with ortho faces. Sometimes it starts this in orthographic mode, and I think that looks kind of weird because the proportion is really strange. So if you want to follow along, do that. I'm going to be modeling this in inches today because I've had a lot of comments from our American viewers that don't understand my native metric language. So we're going to do some of these in inches. I'll go back to some on the metric system in future videos, of course, because that's where I am much more comfortable, and it's where I do all my personal design. But we are going to be doing some in inches today, and you'll see some others that are in both inches and in metric already on the live stream playlists on the channel. So before we get started, if you are interested in seeing more of these, you can always subscribe, but we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. So the first thing that we want to do is we are going to think about where to draw our box. Now, if you look at a box from the side, you can't really tell all that much about it. But if you look at a box from the top, especially if you take the top off the box, you can see almost every dimension and every shape that is going to take place in our box. So that's where we're going to start today. We're going to start by modeling on the top of our box. Now, in Fusion, we start by creating a sketch and picking a plane. That means we're going to pick a plane to draw a two-dimensional sketch on. What I want to do is I want to pick the plane where I get the most information about the dimensions of my object. And so if I think about looking down at a box, we get lots of information on the dimensions, on the joinery, on everything. So that's where we're going to start. Now this little circle in the middle here, that is our origin point. Everything rotates around that origin point. And up here we have our tools. Now this one up here with the dot in the middle is a center point rectangle. That means it is symmetrical in both directions around a center point. So we're going to click that and click in the origin. And we're going to start with dimensions for the actual box. Now, rather than typing things in here, we're just going to make a box. And we're going to go up to our dimension tool. You can push D or click on it here in the menu. And we are going to say, click on the side, and we're going to make our box exactly 4 inches. So I type in 4 and hit enter. By 7 inches. I'll type in 7 and hit enter. So our box is now 4 inches by 7 inches, and it is symmetrical around the center axis, which is going to be very useful for us in the future. Now, this is a mitered box. So we are going to have a side on each side and a front and a back, and they are going to be mitered at 45 degrees. Now, we already have some lines dividing up this box, but they are not at 45 degrees. So don't think about those as dividing lines. Those are just lines of symmetry. So we are going to draw half a side and half a face of this box. And you'll see why we do that in a minute. I will start from the middle and draw down to the side. And again, I will start from the middle and draw up to the side. So we now have half one side and half one face drawn. I want to use the same size thickness of stock to do all of this. So I'm going to go up here to constraints, and you see this equals sign here. I'll click on that, and I will make the height of this side equal to the width of this side by clicking on one then the other, and then I will hit escape to exit that tool. Now they are the same size, but we don't know what size that is. So I'm going to go up here to dimension, and I'm going to click on that side and click on the background. And we are going to make these sides exactly 3/8 of an inch thick. It's a little thick for this box, but it'll work fine for what we're doing here. And now you can see that that is all turned totally black, which means there are no more dimensions that it needs. Once you put in all the dimensions to fully realize or fully qualify your drawing, all of them turn from blue to black. If you see any blue lines or any red guidelines, you need to make sure that you put in enough dimensions to turn them all black, or you will end up with problems later. Now, you can always come back and edit stuff, but for now, we're going to do that. And there's one other thing we need. We need the 45-degree miter. So I will click on this line, and I will go from the inside corner to the outside corner. And that's already black because it knows what that dimension is. But that is a 45-degree line across that square. We know it's a square because the width of one is the same as the width of the other, and that's sort of the definition of a square. And now you can see, if it wasn't obvious before, that dividing line, which is nowhere near 45. So if we had used that for our miter, well, that wouldn't have been so good. It would have worked, but it would have looked really, really odd in the box. So we're going to hit Finish Sketch. Now, when we go up here, I got a few more commands to show you. If we scroll on our mouse wheel, we will zoom in and zoom out. If we click our mouse wheel, we will drag it around the screen so we can see different pieces of it. And if we hold Shift and do the same thing, click and drag, we will rotate in three-dimensional space around this object. So what we want to do is we want to take this Extrude command here and click on the pieces that we're going to build the box from. I want the side and half that miter. And now if I rotate up, all I need to do is tell it how tall do I want the box to be. Now, we're going to go down from here because we're going to put a lid on this box in a minute, and it's going to be easier if we have the box the other way around. And I'm going to say that's going to be 3 inches, but it's in the opposite direction, so it's -3. So we're going to have a 3-inch thick box, and we're going to create a new body from it. Okay? Now our sketch has gone away, and we only have one of our pieces. So we will open up this sketch folder over here on the left, and we will click on the eye to show it again. If I hit Extrude and do the same thing for the other 2 pieces, I could drag this down and make it 3 inches as well. But if I need to change that depth, that means now I have to change 2 things. So instead of that, I'm going to change from extent type distance to extent type to object. And I will click the bottom of our other side. So now they are linked together. Now, if I say join, that's going to turn all of this into a single piece of wood. That would be a really strangely shaped piece of wood. So I'm going to say new body again and hit OK. So now I have two bodies, and I'm going to hide that sketch because we don't need it anymore. If we open up the bodies folder here, I'm going to hide both of them. Now if I turn on the first one, it is one part of our mitered box. And if I turn on the second one, you can see it's a different part of our mitered box. I can turn them back on both at the same time, and I have this nice little side here. Now, why did I do it this way rather than modeling the whole box? Well, it's because the whole thing is symmetrical, and we need to do a little bit of joinery here. Now, one of the things that we want to be careful of when we do our joinery is that it is realistic. A realistic joinery for a box like this is that we're going to cut in a few splines on the end. Now, to cut in the splines, what we're going to do is draw one of the splines, and then we're going to use that to create the other ones. So I'm going to say create a sketch on one of these pieces, and I'm going to use the project command to get the other piece. The project command, if I hit P, will allow me to copy the dimensions of anything else that I have in my Fusion model. So I already have the dimensions of the piece I'm drawing on. I need the dimensions of the other piece to be there as well, so that when I draw the spline, I know where the other edge is. So I now hit OK. I will zoom in, and I'm going to draw a spline. What does a spline look like? It looks like a line from one side to the other. Okay? Now, what I want to do is I want that spline to be exactly the right depth. So I'm going to come up here to coincident. You can hit constraints and you find coincident in here. Coincident, and I'm going to say that this line goes through this point, the inside corner. And that line now is going to be going right through that point. The only other thing that we have to be careful of with that line is that it is not 45 degrees. So let's click on our dimension tool. And we're going to click on the line, and then we're going to click on the bottom line on that guide. And over here, we will just type in 45 degrees. Now we have a 45-degree triangle. And we will hit Finish Sketch. Now, that is on the top. We're not going to put a spline on the top, are we? We want to put that spline actually in the middle. Well, not necessarily in the middle, but we want it to be somewhere in the middle. So I am going to say extrude. I will look up here, and I want these two pieces here. So just click one and then the other. And I want it to be an 1/8-inch spline. So we'll say 1/8 of an inch, and it will be a new body. Okay, well that's great, but we have a 1/8-inch spline that is actually sitting on top of our box. But we have a magic way of dealing with this. If we change this to be symmetrical, and instead of typing in 1/8, we have it go 1/16 in both directions, it is now centered on that line. And if we say we want to offset it by 1.5 inches in the negative, it will now be exactly in the center of our board and 1/8 inch thick. You can see it right there if I hover over body 3. Now, what I actually want is I want 3 of these. Now, if I go up here and say Create, and I say I want a rectangular pattern, I can change this to bodies. Pick the body. You can pick it here, or you can pick it up here in the tree, body 3. You can name these. We're going to name some of them in a minute, but for now, we won't worry about it. I will pick a direction, which is this blue direction, up, and I will drag it up. Now, I want 3 splines, but I don't want 3 starting from the middle. I'm going to change that to be symmetrical, so that my 3 splines are actually not separated in one direction, but separated in both directions equally. Now, I have this distance type set to spacing. It can go to extent or spacing. I usually use spacing. And I want those to be 1 inch apart. And I'm going to hit OK. So now, if you look, I have 1, 2, 3 in there. Of course, you can't really see them because they're the same wood, and they're right in the middle of two existing bodies. So what are we going to do about that? Let's fix that. We're going to go up here and hit Combine in the Modify menu. And we're going to cut one piece, then we select all three of our bodies. Make sure Keep Tools and Cut is turned on, and hit OK. We've already done this task once to this piece. We want to repeat it. You can repeat any command by right-clicking on the background and hit Repeat Combine. It will say Repeat, and it'll give you the name of the command you just used. We'll pick this side, and again, over here in the tree, we will select all three of those and hit OK. We now have spline slots cut and splines to fill them. Now, what I like to do is, if you were going to do this with actual splines, you'd probably use a contrasting wood. If you're going to make this box out of something nice, let's say we're going to make it out of cherry, you might use some oak to accent it, which is going to be a much lighter color, especially if it's white oak. So we're going to hit A for appearance, and we're going to go down here and look at our woods. If any of these don't show up, you can always just click the little download button beside them, and we are going to change the main material of our whole thing to cherry by dragging cherry onto the main part of our angle here. Now, we want to actually make some of these things oak. So we will scroll down, find our oak here, and we are going to drag this onto body 3, body 4, and body 5. And look at that. We now have a cherry outside box with oak splines in it, which I think looks pretty good. It almost gives the impression of dovetails, but not quite. And if you have a box this small, maybe what you want is to be able to do this. And if we look on the inside, those don't go through all the way, but that is about where they are ending up. Okay, so we have made one corner of our box. How are we going to make the rest of our box? Well, let's talk about mirroring. This mirror command up here allows us to duplicate things across lines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the rest of those pieces appear by mirroring across their centers. So if I click Mirror, select Bodies, and pick one of those long sides, then I click Mirror Plane and mirror it across the center on that direction. I pick Join because I want it to be part of the same body and hit OK. Now I'm going to right-click on the background and hit Repeat, and do the same thing for the shorter side, mirroring it across, again, the other piece. Join, and hit OK. Now I have the other side. Now that's great. You're thinking, well, those are two pieces, I'll just have to draw the other two. But no, if we say Repeat Mirror, we will pick one side and mirror it across to the other side. Hit OK. Repeat again, pick this end, mirror it across to the other side, and hit OK again. And now we have that whole piece. Now, this is starting to be a lot of bodies, so we should do something about that. A body is like a piece of wood. Each of these bodies is a piece of wood. That's not always a one-to-one relationship, but that's a good way to start thinking of it. Now, what we want to do is we're going to group those pieces of wood by creating a component. A component is like a container for pieces of wood. We're going to give the first component the name Box Sides. I usually name them all in lowercase, and every new word I use a capital. That's fairly standard, but, well, it is your choice how to name them. And I'm going to put bodies 1, 2, 6, and 7, and I'm going to drag them into box sides. So now if I turn that off and turn it on, you can see that the sides appear and disappear. I'll go back here and do the same thing. New component, and I'm going to call this Splines. I've only got 3 of them, so if I select them and drag those into splines, now I go back and I can reactivate the main component. Some people like to work in the components, and there are times when I do that if it's really complex, but for the most part, I don't bother. I work in the main box, in the main component, and I have separate components for a lot of things, and sometimes I group these components into other components, which you'll see in more advanced live streams. Now I've got 3 of those splines in there, and if I open that up, I can see 1, 2, 3. It doesn't matter which one is which, but what I want to do is I want to fill those in now. So if I say mirror, and I select those 3, hit mirror, and mirror them across the center line, and hit OK, I now have 6, and you can see it in the tree. If I repeat that command, select all 6, and mirror those 6 across the center in the other direction, I now have 12 bodies, and that's all 12 splines that I want to cut into this box. Now, the reason that we've done those as mirrors is, for one, it makes it simpler, but for 2, it makes it so much easier to deal with editing them. Now, I want to put a sliding top and a bottom into this box. I think those splines might be a little too close, so I'm going to go back. Remember that we have a history tree at the bottom here, and I will right-click on that rectangular pattern, hit Edit Feature, and instead of them being separate by 1 inch, I'm going to separate them by 3/4 of an inch, and hit OK. And now we have 3 splines on each corner, separated by 3/4 of an inch. And we have only had to make 1 change. So let's close up our, oops, don't want to hide it, I want to close it. Now, if we do hide it, you can see that there are actual spline slots cut through all of these corners to match these splines. And if we turn off the sides, you can see all the splines there floating in space. So we've got that done. That is a very, very good start. But we need a bottom on this box. Now, if we're going to make a bottom, let's go down to the bottom. You can see it says bottom up here in the square. And we're going to draw a sketch on the bottom. We can pick any bottom piece. And because we want the dimensions of all the other ones, we hit P for project and select the other 3 pieces. You can always drag stuff around with the middle mouse button. And we will hit OK. So now we have all the dimensions of the other pieces. If I say I'm going to create a center point rectangle, starting from the center, and I go out to somewhere here. That's not where it needs to be. Don't worry about drawing things in the right place. Just draw them somewhere. Then sort of drag them vaguely to the right place. I want that to be inset exactly 1/4 inch. So I will click on Dimension. I will pick the outside edge of my new drawing, and I will pick the inside edge of the box, and I will type in 1/4 inch. And that's a bit too far. So now that I see where it is, I'm going to double click on it again and make it 1/8 inch. And that looks much more sensible. Now I can drag the other piece. Remember, this is a center point rectangle, so it is going to be symmetrical around the center in both directions. So I'll drag it to about where I want it to be. Scroll in, dimension, and the dimension between those 2. Now I could type that in as being 1/8, but I don't need to do that. I can just click on the one I've already defined and hit Enter. Now if I edit the first one, it will edit the second one as well. We can switch back and forth. We can make it 1/16 of an inch, and both will shrink down. If we double click on it again, we can change it back to 1/8, and they will both move back up. Looks pretty good. All right, so we now have a sketch for our bottom. I'm going to say Finish Sketch. Now, there are different ways to attach a box bottom, and the way that I think would look great on this box is to have the box look like it's floating. So I'm going to click on this Extrude tool, and I am going to click on each of the pieces that are inset plus the center. And I am going to say that I want this to be 2 sides. Going up into the box, I want it to go up 1/4 inch. And going down into the box, I want it to be going down also 1/4 of an inch. Now, that's going to be a very, very thick box. So let's think about that for a second. In terms of proportion, if you look at this from the side, you can see where it's going to be. We don't want that to be 1/4 of an inch. We probably want that to be more like 1/8. Now, some of this is trial and error on my part because, well, I don't deal with imperial on a regular basis, and it's a little weird for me to think in these terms. But if this is going to be 1/8 and 1/8, that's going to make us have a 1/4 of an inch thick box, and we are going to say new component. Remember, we were modeling in bodies before, but now we're going to model in components because we've made some components, and this will put the box bottom in one of its own. And I will hit OK. Not bad. And you see, it's made it from cherry because we have set the default to be cherry. If we double click on it and edit that, we're going to give it a name, bottom. You can always change them anytime you like, and now we can see that we have this nice little floating bottom. Now, that bottom is actually inset into all of these sides. We have to be very careful of that. So we need to cut a little rabbet in each of them. So if I hide this bottom, you can see that there's no rabbet there. But if we go in and we say combine, and we cut the side with the bottom, and hit OK. And we repeat that to cut the front with the bottom. Rotate around, cut the other one with the bottom. And one more side with the bottom. Now if we flip up and hide our bottom, you can see we have a rabbet exactly matching the piece that we used to cut it out. So we have a nice little inset piece here. Now if you really want to be fancy about it, we can actually hit A for appearance and drag our same little oak model onto our bottom, and now we don't just have a thin piece of oak used as a spline, we have a nice piece of oak that's thin used in our bottom groove as well. And I would assume that would be glued in. It would be glued in because it would probably be a piece of plywood that is veneered to look like oak. And in practical ways, I would actually paint the outside edges of this. I wouldn't veneer them. I would paint the outside edges of this. And I would probably use some paint on the inside as well to give a little pop of color instead. But these are aesthetic decisions, and they don't really have much to do with the modeling. So we're going to continue on. We've made a nice little box here already, but what I really want to do is think about making this box in terms of how it is going to look. Well, I think the sides on this box look a little thick before we continue. So I'm going to go back, and I'm going to show you how to edit something without having to go back and model it again. So I right-click on this sketch 1 and hit Edit Sketch. You see where we have in here defined as 3/8? Well, I'm going to say that's 1/4 just by double-clicking, changing it, and hitting Finish Sketch. And now it's made all the splines different size, all the sides a different size, and it's even changed the size of our bottom to make it further out. And if we hide it, we can still see that we have our 1/4 inch rabbet on the inside of our box. So that is the magic of using Fusion 360 to deal with these things. Now the other thing that we need is a lid. For a box like this, there are lots of ways to make a lid. But the one that I said we were going to use in the description was we were going to make a sliding lid in a groove. And I think that is a great way of doing this. Something that I'm noticing here, by the way, is that these two faces have the grain going in the wrong direction. If that bothers you, you can fix it. You don't have to because this is a model, and when you actually build this box, you will have the grain going all the way around the box. But if that bothers you, you can actually go in here into Appearance and fix it. I will show you how to do that in a later episode because it is a little more involved. But just be aware that you can actually change those things. It is in here in, actually I'll show you now, Texture Map Controls. You right-click on it and say Texture Map Controls. And we see that we have this grain going that way. Now if I take this control and I drag it down to 90 degrees and I hit OK, now you'll see the grain is going in the right direction. You see the other one? We right-click on it and say Repeat Texture Map Controls, and drag our arc down to 90 degrees. And now our grain is going in the right direction. The grain on the bottom is already going in a nice direction. But, sometimes that helps you to model things out if you get the grain pointing in the right way, to think about the joinery and the wood movement. Sometimes it really doesn't matter at all. So we want to create a lid for this box. And the lid for this box is not going to be like that bottom one. We're going to create a 1/8 inch thick sliding lid. And we're going to attach it to a piece here of this side, which we're going to call the front, but it's going to call it the right side. All right, so the nice thing about this is that we already have a sketch that is exactly that right size. So let's turn that sketch back on. And we are going to say extrude, pick that sketch. Actually, that's not that sketch, but that's the right size. We've picked the bottom of the box. And we're going to say we're going to start from another object, not the bottom of the box. We're going to start from the top of the box. And we are going to offset that exactly 1/4 of an inch. But that's 1/4 of an inch up, if you look, see? So we're going to say minus 1/4 of an inch. It's going to be down into the box 1/4 of an inch. And it is going to be 1/8 of an inch thick. We don't want to join it to the box. We want to make a new component and hit OK. And if we go up here and look, we have now a cherry lid. I think it's a bit too far into the box, so we're going to go back and edit this feature. And instead of -1/4, we're going to change that to -1/8. So it's an 1/8 inch in from the top, and we will rename this top. Now that's nicely in there, but one of the things that we want to be very careful of is that we have to cut the joinery for it. So how do we cut the joinery? Combine, side, top. Okay. Combine, side, top. Okay. There is a faster way of doing this, but this is probably the one that I would suggest for beginners. The more programmatic way of doing it is a little more involved. Now, if we turn off the top and we go in here and look, we should have a groove running all the way around our box. Now, the only thing that we need to do beyond that is we want to join that top piece to this side here. So I'm going to go up here and say Modify, Combine. And instead of cut, we are going to say, no, we're not actually going to join it. We're going to cut off a piece of this. We're going to cut off a piece of this side. So we are going to cut, split our body, split this side. Now, if I turn off, not just the sketch, but the sides, I can rotate around, and I will select as my splitting tool the bottom of my top panel. And you can see now, if we look at it from the side, it is going to cut exactly where you would cut if you were going to do this in real life. Okay. Now, if I turn the box sides back on and open up our bodies, you can see I have created body 5 and body 4, which are two separate pieces. Body 4 is the top and body 5 is the side. And I want to join those two pieces together with glue so that when that is in, so that when the box is put together, that top piece will slide with the top of this side, and I can just use that as the handle to pull it out. And that will give us my sliding box, which is great. Now, I think this is a very beautiful little box here, and that's really all we would be doing. There are some other things that some people do. If you want to, for example, break the edges, we can model breaking the edges by going up here and saying Modify, Chamfer, which will give us a chamfer edge, or Fillet, which will give us a round over edge. And I'll tell you why I don't normally do that unless that's actually going to create a big radius or a big angle. And that is because if I want to measure any of these angles on this box, or I want to measure any of the dimensions, if I've already broken the edge and I've said, Okay, I want to move that in a 1/16 of an inch. Now all my dimensions are going to include that broken edge rather than be the basic measurement that I was using in the box. So that's why I don't normally model them unless I'm mocking something up for a client and I'm doing a show render. So now we have that, and we have this box done. So if you have any questions or anything, you can throw them in the chat while we're working, and sometimes I'll see them and sometimes I won't. But if you have any questions, stick them in the comments below once this video actually goes fully into the YouTube channel. I wouldn't bother to put them in there until then because I'm not really sure if you can see the comments when it switches from live to be recorded live. Or you can go to our website and send the questions over, or find me on any of the woodworking forums that I am an active member of. So I want to thank you for coming and joining us today for this, all the people who are on the live stream, and anyone who comes back and joins us later to watch this. I think this is great progress if you have just started with Fusion 360, and there are lots of other videos that are already there on the live streams and that are coming. But if there is something that you're looking for, something you want to know how to do in Fusion 360 that might be of interest to other woodworkers and designers in the woodworking community, feel free, leave a comment, send a suggestion, and I will see what I can do to make a video about it for you. So if you've liked this, please click the like button. If you haven't liked it, you can always click the dislike button and give it a thumbs down. But if you do that, if you could, leave a comment and tell us why it is that you didn't like the video, and what we can do to make it better for next time, and we might reach out to you to get your help so that we can provide you what you're looking for. If you want to see more content like this, you can click the subscribe button and ring the bell because we do a lot of lives here, and that way you might actually be able to join us. We do some of them in the morning, some in the afternoon, some in the evening. We do lots of weekend lives. And that means that wherever in the world you are, there will probably be some lives that are at the time that you want. If you're interested in live stream classes one-on-one or for a group, again, you can check it out on the website, or you can just leave a comment down below. And beyond that, remember that these are all free classes and free live stream sessions. So if you want to get any of your friends in on this and help them out with their modeling and woodworking, you can feel free to share it with them or share it on your social media, and we would really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have great fun in your shop today, whether you're modeling or building something from the actual wood. Thanks again. Have a great day.